So the first year of the Rainbow Circle, I'm going to talk about what happened at the end of that year, the Astrology Camp. It was at Yoke Farm in Leominster, near Leominster. And it'd been very wet. And we were maybe 2 or 3 days into the Astrology Camp when Helen turned up with her bus. And we said, no, don't drive it across the field, you'll get stuck. No, I won't get stuck. But of course she did get stuck. And so part of the scenario of that camp was getting Helen's bus out of the mud. And it was quite extraordinary because almost the whole camp was there, pushing and pulling, and eventually we got it out of the mud. It was a real adventure in communal energy. Helen the Hat was an extraordinarily amazing woman. Another Aquarian. She was, I think she's 23 years younger than me. I remember it being 23, I think, because it was a special number, 23. Anyway, she ran a children's area, and oh gosh, I can't think back that far. How did she? I don't know. I can't remember how she'd come into the Rainbow Circle. She must have come in at the end of the Oak Dragon, I think. Or maybe she came in. Ah, I know. No, I don't know. What? I think she came in via Fred. Now, I don't know how Fred came into it either, come to think of it. But I know that we were all there at the planning stages of the Rainbow Circle, which was in a square in South London where Music Martin used to live. I can't remember the name of the square. But we had lots of planning meetings and jumble sales there, and we used to have, basically it was a gathering, and we all put in whatever money we could spare and got things going. So Helen turned up at one of those, and she came subsequently to many of our camps for years. But at this stage, she was quite new to the Rainbow Circle, and but she's a very flamboyant and vocal character. And if you had met her, you would know. So where was I? Yes, it was her bus that got stuck. Another story about this particular camp was that some friends of mine had come from London. They were a couple originally, but then they'd come to teach astrology, and once they got there, or maybe before they got there, I think before they got there, they fell out. And when they got there, they decided to set up their camps separately, next to each other, but separately. But they only had one gas stove and one gas bottle, and the guy whose name was Chris, I think, and I can't remember what his girlfriend was called. But anyway, he owned one half of it, and she owned the other half of it. I think he owned the gas stove, and she owned the gas bottle. So there they are, cooking something, and they are row. And one of them takes away disconnects the gas bottle and the gas stove, which created a fireball. And Chris got completely enveloped by this fireball. Fortunately, there was a stream, and we got Chris into the stream, and for the next, I'd say the next 3 hours, he was ministered unto by all sorts of beautiful young ladies who were very happy to pour cold water over his body and his face until the heat went down. And amazingly, he came out of that situation without a scar. So that was a very interesting example of exactly what cold water can do if you get into it quickly enough once you're burned. So that was one other story that I wanted to tell. But the story about this camp is the last circle of the season. Now, this was our first season. We'd only done 3 camps. The Astrology was the last camp, and it was ending at the end of August. Oak Dragon was still got another camp to go in their program. They also were running camps. So Jeremy, we were at were we at the Oak? We were somewhere near Leominster anyway, and Jeremy Sanford came, and he came to the last big circle of the camp. This was our closing circle. Everyone was there. And we had a round. People would say something they wanted to say about the camps, and they would say, goodbye and see you next year and all of that sort of thing. And when it came to Jeremy, he talked about how he had this semi-detached mansion up at Hatfield Court, it was called. And he and Philippa got quite lonely over the winter, and so he would really quite like it if some of the Rainbow Circle would go and visit him. He'd got a bit of parking space, not a lot, but got a bit of parking space. Mind you, he wasn't actually going to be there for the next month because he and Philippa were going to the Oak Dragon. But at the end of September, he would really welcome Rainbow Circle visitors. Well, it wasn't quite the right thing to say in the middle of a circle of people who were always looking for somewhere to park up. And so when Jeremy got back at the end of September, Rainbow Circle, including Helen the Hat and George and Sid and Jules, they were all really well ensconced. And Johanna, and not only were they ensconced on the land, but they had somehow or other got into the house and run an electricity lead out. So they had electricity and presumably they would have had use of the rooms. I think that basically, mostly what happened was that the kids went in there and played in there. And I know that Ra, that's Sid's son, managed to burn some of the ancient oak panelling that was in one of the rooms. Anyway, Jeremy came back and he wasn't too pleased to find all these people who had, half of whom he had never met really, who had just sort of moved into his space. I think by then there were people actually living in the house as well. So yeah, that presented us all with a bit of a problem. But Jeremy was a great guy, and he was very pro-traveller. So he managed to get it sorted out, but he really struggled for quite a while because Sid, who was the main head honcho there, he was a difficult person to deal with if you wanted to assert some sort of control over his behaviour, or his children's for that matter. So it did present us with a few problems, but I thought it was quite an interesting story because it shows how innocent we all were in those days. You know, Jeremy, even though he'd been working with travellers and writing about travellers for years, he still didn't quite realise the implications of standing in this huge circle of about 150 people and inviting everybody to go and park up at his place. So that's that story. Okay, can you turn that off now? Let's think about another one, maybe.
Well, can I ask you a question? So how did you feel that season went then, that first season, Rainbow Circle?
Well, it was only 3 camps and they were great.
Yeah, and they were 10-day camps?
Yep.
And people were paying to come?
Yep.
But nothing like £70?
No. We had a sliding scale. And it was based on the amount of money that the dole paid. And the dole paid 30 quid. And so 30 quid was our top price. No, it wasn't our top price. It was our lowest price, I guess. Yes, I think it was our lowest price. And then we had a sliding scale that went up to about 150. Not that anybody ever paid that. But yes, everybody, you know, people did pay, and there was enough money to keep the show on the road because none of us were paid.
And what cafes did you have then?
Oh, we had the agoraphobic parrots. Jeff and Roy. Now, Roy went on to organise one of the fields at Glastonbury Festival. I can't remember what it's called, the field below Undall, where all the nightlife takes place. Yeah. Roy Gervis, that was his name. And Jeff, I used to call him Jeff Parrot because he was from the agoraphobic parrots. So they were the cafe in the first 2 camps. I think for the Astrology Camp, we had a vegan cafe. Mark and Sue, I think, ran the vegan cafe, although I can't be sure of that because they also had showers. But the thing was that the vegan food, most of it was fine because we mostly ate rice and vegetables anyway, but there were sweet things like cakes. And rather than have eggs or any other rising agent, they would put bicarb in them. And so, to my palate, the cakes were just sugar and bicarb with a bit of flour in them. And I didn't really like them at all. And therefore, when the next season happened, I think the next season was when we went to Bath Eastern. We had a cattle site there. I think that was the next season. And when I was organising people to to come to that site. Mark wanted to come and bring his showers, but to charge people. And that wasn't how we worked. So I said no. I said we would pay his expenses and any expenses that he incurred on the camp, but that he couldn't charge people, and so he didn't want to come, so he didn't come. And Mark and I have always had a bit of a dodgy scene since then, even now. Well, what else?
What communal spaces did you have for, doing workshops and things?
Benders mostly.
Yeah.
Until Johanna got her dome, which I think was after the first year. Johanna got a big white dome, which was beautiful. It was the only structure that was actually secure and rainproof and and sort of professional. No, I don't.
So the cafe was in a marquee.
I don't remember where the cafe was initially.
But most people were doing things in vendors.
Yes. Now, wait a minute. I got together with Fred, Beltane 89, when he had the cafe. Now we're already talking about.
And which cafe was that one?
That was the Golden Moon.
Right.
Oh,
which
sorry.
is the one where all, yeah. It's just that
Yeah.
people.
Yes. I'm sorry.
That's right.
Um,
So that was the famous Golden Moon Cafe.
It was indeed, yes, indeed. Yeah. It wasn't the Golden Moon Cafe at that point, it was just Fred's bus. And he would serve teas and coffees and cakes and things. I think we mostly catered for ourselves. I can't remember now how that all panned out right at the very beginning. Because that would have been. That wasn't the first year, because our first year was 88. I know, 88, Beltane, we went to Derbyshire, and I coordinated that camp with a very proper, very very army guy who'd been in the army, called Bran. And Bran, he was very well educated and very posh. But the thing was, he had that much money, but he had more than we did. So we could go places and look at sites and things. And I remember going with him to look at this site in Derbyshire and signing the deal for it. But not at that point, but later on, he told me that he had been part of the British Army at Bloody Sunday. And after that, I found it very difficult to relax and chat with him, because that was such a terrible day. Not that it was here, not that it was in the camps, but I remember Bloody Sunday. Anyway, where were we? Yes, so the first camp after the split, we went to Derbyshire. Now, I think it was in Derbyshire that one of my other stories happened. And that was the story of the full moon ceremony. So I used to have ceremony for each full moon, and quite often the new moons too, but mostly the full moons. And we'd organised this this ceremony to take place at a little stone circle about half a mile down a very small road from the site where we were camped. And so we were all supposed to be meeting in the cafe. I think, I don't remember which cafe it was here. It must have been the Agrophobic Parrot, I suppose. But anyway, we were there. No, I'm getting confused here, date-wise and everything. I think this must have been, I think this was 1995. I don't think this was our very first. No.
Never mind, just tell the story.
Yes, okay. This was 95. It was after the first camp after the split, that's what it was. And it was the golden moon there then. Okay. So we were supposed to meet there at about 8 and zoom off down to and get ourselves together and go down. Maybe not 8, maybe 10, because the time of the full moon was something like 1:20 in the morning. And we wanted to be in circle and to honor that moment. Anyway, we were sitting in the big lodge teepee, those of us who were holding the energies, and it started to pour with rain. Not just rain, pour with rain. It battered down. Of course, when you're in a teepee or in any canvas structure, the rain sounds even worse than it is. And you couldn't even hear each other talk. You couldn't hear anyone speak because the rain was so loud. And we sat there and we sang, Kuate, we are at one with the infinite sun, and so on and so on. And we sat there for ages and ages. And it was like we got towards being near to 12 o'clock and we were going, well, are we going to do it anyway? We've got to do it. We've got to do it. We planned it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it anyway. And we set our resolve. And then at about 5 to 12, the rain stopped. It was quite stunning. We couldn't believe it at first. The rain stopped. And then, so we got ourselves together and we were up on a bit of a rise. So we walked down the rise, got to the cafe, which was not quite underwater, but very muddy. And there was everybody hanging out in the cafe and waiting to go to the ceremony. I'm sure they were just hanging out in the cafe to be away from the rain initially, but when we got there, they were all up for going, and we went off a half-mile or so walk down this very little road, and then a gate on the right, and a little tiny circle of standing stones. Well, tiny in comparison to Stonehenge, you know. There were about, I think there must have been about 20 of us, and we made a circle in stones, and it wasn't raining, but it was still dark and cloudy and quite, and I mean, although it was full moon, it was dark because the moon was covered by the rain clouds. And it started to get a little bit lighter, so that was okay. We managed fine, and we called in the elements, and we started our ceremony, and we got to the point where we were going to honor the full moon, because that was the time, and the clouds opened, and the moon was there, and the moon shone on us while we danced. We went oh, what's the song? In the moonlight we
Yeah.
dance, spirits dance, we dance, holding hands we dance, joining souls rejoice. Yeah. Under the full moon's light we dance. That's how it goes. Anyway, yeah. So that was a magic time. And it didn't stay out very long, just long enough for us to honour her and to have a little dance. And then the rain started again. So when the rain started, needless to say, we scuttled back to the camp. But that was I thought that was such an amazing affirmation of the fact that we were doing something right somewhere along the road. A similar story happened later on in the camps at Flaxley. And it was the year that Mars was at its closest point to the Earth that it was going to be for goodness knows how long. And we were going to honour this time, and we had a ceremony set up, big circle of energy. There's a lot of people on this camp, even though there probably weren't that many people paying, but there were a lot of people there. And I think that, yeah, anyway. So we were up in the little garden up by the woods. We'd set up this garden. I think it was a memorial garden for somebody. And we had circled around the garden, and we were on our way, processing down the hill and into the flag circle, which was at the bottom of the rise. And we moved round and we got into our positions and we honoured the directions. And once again, just like with the moon, we turned, and I remember the marquee being there, the Golden Moon marquee being there, and we turned towards the river, and up there, suddenly, the clouds parted and there was Mars, just at that right moment. And those moments are so precious. They really are. Yeah.